If you work a full-time job, you'd need to work for over 11,000 years without spending a single dollar to become as wealthy as the average person in the top 1%. Let that sink in. 11,000 years? Right now, at this very moment, the wealthiest 1% of people on Earth control 45% of all global wealth. That's not a conspiracy theory. That's not an exaggeration. That's the documented reality of our economic system. And the gap isn't just wide, it's accelerating at a pace that most people can't even comprehend. According to the latest Credit Suisse Global Wealth Report, the richest 1% now own more wealth than the entire bottom 95% combined. We're talking about approximately 59 million people controlling $214 trillion in assets. Meanwhile, the bottom half of humanity, that's almost 4 billion people, collectively owns less than 1% of total global wealth. To put that in perspective, the 8 richest individuals have more wealth than the poorest 3.6 billion people combined. But here's what nobody tells you about this wealth concentration. It's not just some abstract economic problem. This is actively reshaping every aspect of our lives right now. Housing markets that price out entire generations. Healthcare systems that function as wealth extraction machines, education costs that create permanent debt classes, political systems where billionaires have more influence than entire voting populations. And this isn't happening in some distant future. This is your present reality. Every single day, the gap widens, and the mechanisms that created this imbalance are accelerating, not slowing down. So how did we get here? How did a system that's supposed to reward hard work and innovation create the most extreme wealth inequality in recorded history? Stay with me, because the answer is going to challenge everything you think you know about how wealth actually works. Now, let me show you exactly how the wealthy don't just maintain their wealth, they multiply it exponentially while everyone else struggles to keep up. This is the part where the system reveals its true design. Imagine you have $100. If you're in the bottom 99%, that money sits in a checking account earning 0.01% interest while inflation eats away at its value. But if you're in the top 1%, that same $100 becomes the foundation for wealth multiplication through mechanisms that aren't even available to average earners. First, there's the capital gains advantage. If you work for your money, you pay ordinary income tax, anywhere from 10 to 37%, depending on your bracket. But if your money works for you through investments, you pay capital gains tax, maxing out at just 20%. The wealthier you are, the larger the percentage of your income comes from investments rather than wages. Second, there's the asset appreciation loop. When the Federal Reserve lowers interest rates to stimulate the economy, asset prices rise, stocks, real estate, bonds. Who owns these assets? Predominantly the top 10%, who own 89% of all stocks. So monetary policy designed to help the overall economy disproportionately inflates the wealth of those who already have assets. Third, there's the debt leverage advantage. Wealthy individuals and corporations can borrow money at incredibly low interest rates because they have assets to use as collateral. They then use this cheap debt to buy more assets, which appreciate and generate returns that exceed the cost of borrowing. It's a wealth multiplication machine. Meanwhile, average people borrow at high interest rates for cars, education, and emergencies. Fourth, the tax avoidance infrastructure. The ultra-wealthy don't just pay lower rates, they have access to strategies that make their effective tax rate almost laughable. Opportunity zone investments, donor-advised funds, dynasty trusts, carried interest loopholes, tax loss harvesting, real estate depreciation schedules. These aren't illegal. They're built into the tax code, but they require wealth advisors, tax attorneys, and significant capital to access. Let's talk about housing, because this is where wealth inequality transforms from abstract statistics into your daily lived experience. And the story here is even more troubling than most people realize. In 1970, the median home price in America was roughly 3 times the median household income. Today, it's more than 7 times median income in many markets, and in cities like San Francisco or New York, it's 12 to 15 times. But here's what makes this devastating. Housing isn't just shelter. It's the primary wealth-building tool for middle-class families. When you price people out of homeownership, you don't just deny them a place to live. You deny them access to the main mechanism that created middle-class wealth in America. And who's buying these homes that average workers can no longer afford? Increasingly, it's institutional investors and ultra-wealthy individuals treating real estate as just another asset class. In 2022, investors purchased nearly 30% of all single-family homes sold. Private equity firms, hedge funds, and wealthy individuals are converting entire neighborhoods from ownership opportunities into permanent rental properties. They can pay cash, buy in bulk, and wait out any market conditions because they're not buying a home. They're buying an investment vehicle. This creates a vicious cycle. Investor purchases drive up prices. Higher prices push more people into renting. Increased rental demand allows landlords to raise rents. Higher rents make it harder to save for a down payment. And the cycle continues. But it gets worse. The tax code actively encourages this. If you're a wealthy real estate investor, you can deduct mortgage interest, property taxes, depreciation, and operating expenses. You can use something called a 1031 exchange to sell properties and defer capital gains taxes indefinitely. Meanwhile, rent consumes an ever larger share of income for average workers. In 1960, renters spent about 20% of their income on housing. Today, it's over 30% for the median renter. That's 30% that can't go towards savings, retirement, or building wealth. That's 30% flowing directly to property owners, many of whom are in the top 1%. And this isn't just an American phenomenon. Here's where we need to talk about the uncomfortable truth that ties everything together. When wealth becomes this concentrated, it doesn't just create economic inequality. It creates political inequality. And that's when the system becomes self-reinforcing in truly dangerous ways. Let me give you some numbers that should alarm anyone who cares about democracy. In the 2020 election cycle, the top 0.01% of donors, that's roughly 24,000 people out of 330 million Americans, provided more than 40% of all campaign contributions. These aren't just political donations. These are investments with expected returns. The ultra-wealthy don't just donate to candidates. They fund think tanks that shape policy ideas. They own media outlets that frame public debate. They finance lobbying operations that write actual legislation. According to research from Princeton University, when economic elites support a policy, it has about a 35% chance of being implemented. When average citizens support a policy without elite backing, statistically zero impact on policy outcomes. That's not democracy. That's oligarchy with democratic aesthetics. And this creates a feedback loop that's almost impossible to break. Concentrated wealth leads to political influence. Political influence shapes policy in ways that further concentrate wealth. Those policies make it harder for average people to build wealth while making it easier for the rich to multiply theirs. And the gap continues widening. Look at the carried interest loophole, a tax provision that lets hedge fund managers pay capital gains rates on what's essentially their salary. Every serious tax reform proposal tries to eliminate it. Both parties occasionally promise to close it, but it survives every reform attempt because the people who benefit from it have the resources to protect it. This is just one small example, but it illustrates the pattern perfectly. Or consider bankruptcy laws. If you're an individual drowning in medical debt or student loans, bankruptcy offers limited relief and comes with severe consequences. But if you're a corporation or a wealthy individual with sophisticated legal structures, bankruptcy becomes a tool for protecting assets while shedding obligations. The law isn't neutral. It's written to favor those who can afford the lawyers who write it. This is why solutions focused only on individual behavior miss the point entirely. You can't budget your way out of a system designed to extract wealth from labor and concentrate it in capital. You can't work hard enough to overcome rules literally written by and for billionaires. Behind every statistic I've shared, there are real human stories. Real families making impossible choices. Real people whose lives are fundamentally constrained not by lack of effort or intelligence, but by a system that wasn't designed for their success. Let me paint a picture of what this actually looks like. A registered nurse in her 30s working full-time at a hospital. She has a bachelor's degree, works night shifts, picks up overtime when she can. She's doing everything the American dream promised would lead to stability. But her student loans take 15% of her paycheck. Her rent, for a modest one-bedroom apartment, takes another 35%. Health insurance, car payment, groceries, utilities. By the end of the month, there's almost nothing left to save. One medical emergency, one car repair, one unexpected expense, and she's going into debt. Retirement, buying a home, these feel like impossible fantasies, not realistic goals. Meanwhile, someone born into the top 1% can live comfortably off investment income alone. They didn't work harder, they didn't make better choices. They were born on the right side of a wealth gap that's now almost impossible to cross through labor alone. This is what wealth inequality actually means. It means millions of competent, hardworking people whose labor generates enormous value, but who will never achieve financial security because the system is designed to transfer the wealth they create to capital owners. It means talented young people not pursuing their passions and entire generations delaying plans for families. The psychological toll is immense. Constant financial stress correlates with anxiety, depression, and even physical health problems. When you're always one emergency away from catastrophe, your body exists in a state of perpetual fight or flight. This isn't individual failure. This is systemic design. The reality is that individual choices matter far less than structural conditions. You can't hack your way out of a system engineered to extract value from your labor. This isn't sustainable. Not economically, not socially, not politically. Something has to give. So where does this leave us? I'm going to be completely honest with you. There are no easy individual solutions to a systemic problem of this magnitude, but that doesn't mean you're powerless. First, understand the game you're actually playing. The system is designed to favor capital over labor. That doesn't mean you can't build wealth, but it means you need to understand the actual rules. If you're earning wages, you're at a structural disadvantage compared to people earning investment income. The question is, how do you transition to owning assets? Investing in index funds, real estate, or equity. Wealth comes from ownership. Second, maximize your advantages. Max out retirement accounts, use HSAs, and take advantage of employer matching. These are structural advantages you shouldn't ignore. Third, the real solutions are political and systemic. Individual action matters, but it can't substitute for structural change. Progressive taxation, closing loopholes, labor protections, universal health care. These aren't radical ideas. They're how we built the middle class in the first place. Change is possible, but only if people understand what they're fighting for. Systems change when they become unsustainable or when people demand better. What happens next depends on us. Hit that subscribe button to keep exploring these dynamics. Thanks for watching.